what is good about me? And then to have someone say, there's a lot good about you. Because, I mean, ultimately that is what we're here to do. And when you create that foundation, the house that's built on top of it, of academic strength, I think that's why this has so much promise when it comes to not only elementary, but to middle school and high school. If the palatable source of content is there to show that this connects to social studies and civilizations and ELA and reading, writing, speaking, and listening, and if you were to, and those are just, you know, pieces of content that it easily relates to, but if you were to show that connectivity, the deeper, richer experience out of it, whether you've built a foundation or not, but you start to tap into something pretty exceptional.
Different ways. I used it to integrate character ed into our ELA program. Well, always looking for different ways for the kids to listen to something rather than me reading a story. So the CD came in really handy because the kids were really interested in listening to another voice, and it was a voice that was, you know, captivating. Like, it wasn't something that was like, it was real, I guess, a real
like a
voice.
Storyteller.
Right,
yeah.
Right. And then I liked the fact that there are the essential questions that go with each story, because that would help me to select a story depending on what character trait I wanted to discuss. And the short response questions were good because I could use that for ELA, very simply. I think that I would add next year some multiple choice questions, maybe, just to kind of, you know, we're always thinking about the New York State test and how we can use whatever we have to get ready for that. And probably, well, there were some extended response questions in there too. So I was always thinking about that because that's the way I am.
The story that the girl who spoke to the trees,
yeah.
We used that story near Earth Day. We did a community cleanup like Mike talked about, and we talked about Mother Nature and how it's important that we take care of the earth. The other kindergarten teacher helped us, each student in the school, to get a tree to bring home to plant.
Mm-hmm.
So we talked about, you know, taking care of that tree and giving back to the earth.
That they can see that.
And we have such a powerful job, and our job is to lift, you know, these children up.
Right.
And if maybe they're not being lifted up at home, we need to lift them up even more here at school.
Your stories are so engaging. They're different from stories that we usually tell to our kids, and they're really riveted when they're listening to them because it's just really not things that they're used to hearing. I love how you have the little background piece at the end of each, and I always read that to the kids so they know where these stories come from and how old some of them are, because I think they don't think in terms of a story being around for a long, long time and thousands of years.
Yeah, and I think that another way, I think a lot of times if we say, no, can't do it, too full, plate's too full, it's just because it's just one more thing to plan for. So I know, especially since we're at the top of the food chain, I think it'd be a great idea to say, well, then let us show you, and bring the 5th graders in and let them, you know, teach it to the 3rd grade or teach it to the kindergartners, or, you know, buddy up and talk about that stuff. It lends itself to being able to pair up with a younger grade, and, you know, then they take the leadership role of teaching the kids this character ed trait, and then they still get the lesson. So I think that would be a way to do it, and then the teacher doesn't have to plan. And like she said, you really can't plan for these things. No. And so it kind of fits into the Common Core in that the students are supposed to be higher level thinking, and they're supposed to be critically thinking, and they're supposed to be communicating and self-reflecting, which is something that's very difficult for especially me with my control issues, to allow them to kind of take the reins and go places. Right. And I never know where it's going to go, and I can't keep my finger on everyone, and so I have a hard time with that. But I think self-reflecting is important, and setting goals is important, and this is a great way to teach them to do that, and to allow them to build up the strategies and the tools to be able to self-reflect appropriately instead of beating themselves up. I
Now,
think
Ralph,
there's a
that's
fine
something
line.
you're going to want to hear, because Ralph did express some concern to me, that he had some negative feedback about, well, how do you do this in the age of Common Core? I would say Autumn's statement's absolutely true, but I would remove the word kinda. I don't think it kinda relates to the Common Core. I think if you're creating a learning experience in which is multidisciplinary and it's spanning some content and it's deep and rich in its experience and it's self-driven by the student. So you're talking about an authentic experience. And then while you're doing this, you're able to slip in some character ed, and it brings all those elements that we've already talked about to the table. It lends itself perfectly. It only requires the willingness of the leadership in the room, which should transcend roles, not just teacher,
Yeah.
but kids themselves.
Well, I love,
And I think storytelling, like, I loved it because storytelling is a lost art. And, you know, after hearing these stories for 6 years, you know, by the time they get to 5th grade, they might have heard them 6 different times. They could maybe go out into the world and retell those stories in their own words, their own family, their own, maybe someday their own children.
And think about if that were to be connected K-12.
Oh, yeah.
Then you have these stories that start with Elva in kindergarten, and they really start to blossom and take root when they reach Helen and Autumn, and then when kids transition to the middle school, it's a completely different building, and there are around 350 different children, and here comes the story with with the stick, and that's a lot of connectivity. I'd also piggyback off of Helen's and expand your question, Ralph. That I would challenge administrators that what Helen said is so critical. You can get so much mileage in an academic sense by building a community in which kids feel greater than themselves because of the larger perspective. And I would say the same thing would be true for a building.